It's my pleasure to welcome Daniel Huttenlocher. He's known as the most influential voice on AI in America. He's the dean of the MIT Schwarzman College of Computing, a leading academic institution that's focused on computing education and research in AI in the world. Along with Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger, you've probably heard of those names. He is the co-author of a seminal book addressing the fascinating exploration of the intersection between technical artificial intelligence capabilities and social science. The name of the book is The Age of AI and Our Human Future. Central question is, how will artificial intelligence change the human experience? We've heard a lot about it during the morning. We're going to hear more about it now. I want him to persuade me that the caption on the morning is not "we're screwed," because that's sure the way I felt listening to an awful lot about AI this morning. Maybe not. And let's hear on that topic and more from Daniel Huttenlocher. Daniel, welcome.
Thanks so much, Dan. Good to see you. It's terrific to be here with you all. What an inspiring previous discussion, and I promise I won't try to sing, even if there wasn't that beforehand. So what I'm really aiming to do today, you know, as a teacher, I always like to say, what's the main thing I'm trying to get across? The main thing I'm trying to get across is that we all need better tools and understanding for the AI future ahead of us. And that the AI future ahead of us does not have to be, in the words of the introduction, we're all screwed. But it does need to be something that is participatory. So AI has been in our lives for almost a decade now. And we saw a bunch of this from earlier speakers today, but I just sort of want to walk through this for a moment. So it's actually 2015 when, how many of you were Google users within, you know, at that point in time? Probably a lot of you used the search engine. The whole search engine changed in 2015, and nobody noticed. They replaced the underlying technology, which is classic hand-coded software, with machine learning and artificial intelligence. 2020, DeepMind developed machine learning for Google Maps. You know, how many of you use that or other navigation software to find your way around? I certainly do all the time. That's AI telling you where to go. So it's telling you what to find, how to find things. It's telling you where to go. Thanks so much. Then in 2022, of course, we saw what's called generative AI, you know, with ChatGPT being launched, generating text, and DALL-E, and a whole set of other programs generating images and video and so forth. So that's the it. But what is it? That's what we're experiencing. That's the stuff. I could stand up here and talk about the technology underlying it, but actually what's important to all of us is not the technology so much. It's what is it used for, and when it's being used for something, what does that mean to us, and how can we help inform its development? So here's a first take at what is AI. Any technology, and I'm not going to talk about the specific technologies. You'll hear people talk about them a lot. I don't actually think it's that relevant, even though I'm a computer scientist who's worked on this technology for decades. So any technology, what's it doing? It's making decisions, recommendations, predictions, or creating content like text, images, audio, video, etc., which we've seen some really great examples of so far today. But with that, you should stop and say, wait a minute, this guy doesn't quite know what he's talking about. We've had weather prediction since like we were children, you know, that wasn't AI. So it's not any technology for doing this. It's any technology for doing this that is trained to perform a task, rather than most software and most systems that require precise instructions developed by experts, what I like to call handcrafted code. And what this change is enabled by is machine learning. And the outcome of this is that these systems now produce results that have three properties that we certainly don't associate with computers historically. Historically, computers are rigid, right? And they sort of do exactly what you tell them, and often it's hard to get to tell them to do what you want. These systems produce results that are imprecise, adaptive, and emergent. And this is what makes them often feel human-like when we use them. So I think of AI as a form of a funhouse mirror. And it sort of distorts the world. You get some other picture. You don't quite necessarily understand what's what in it. And That altered view is not inherently good or bad. So one thing I think is really important for you to take away from today is that people who are saying AI is inherently good or AI is inherently bad are confused, or they have some other agenda that they're trying to convince you of that's not actually what AI is about. The fact that it's sort of an amplifier for human capabilities, whether good or bad, means we have to be very attentive when using AI. But we shouldn't be timid. Like some of my technical peers were calling for pauses in the development of generative AI a year or so ago. That's timidity, that's a mistake. But so is the sort of unbridled audacity of I should be able to use AI for whatever I want to, implications of it be damned. We need to be attentive. So what does that mean? Well, one thing is, and this is something that everybody can understand, but nobody's really quite telling you, it depends a lot on how it's trained, on how the AI system, because it's not being hand-coded by somebody. And depending on how it's trained, you probably read a lot in the news about how it can reinforce errors and bias, around hiring and loan decisions and other things. But what you don't read quite as much about is it can actually make decisions better and fairer. It depends how it's trained. Because when AI is reinforcing errors and bias, what it's really doing is capturing our errors and our bias and amplifying them. It's capturing what we do as people and using that as the basis for what it's learning. But when we use it in the right ways, we can use it to question when we might be making mistakes or when we might be being biased and produce better results. So just saying, oh, it increases bias, let's ban it, is a huge mistake. We're missing the positives of how it can be used to help. One key issue in how it's used is, and you see this if you've used ChatGPT or any of these related generative AI techniques, the thing sounds like an expert. It's very fluent, it sort of tells you what to do. That's actually not a good use. In fact, in studies that have been done in the medical domain, if AI sort of gives the answer as an expert, it actually can increase bias and increase errors. But if it's an interlocutor having a discussion with somebody about what things have been considered, et cetera, it can actually reduce errors and reduce bias. So it depends a lot on how it's being used. And that's not the technology per se. That's something that all of us can look at and look for when AI is being used. So AI is not human, but it certainly can appear to be. This image is just sort of a reminder here. This is a rendering of Talos from Greek mythology. Talos was a being that was forged to be sort of a human-like being that could help defend Crete. So we've had these things in our mythology for a long time, maybe even wishfully. But human behavior is much more than intellect. And what AI is encoding is some form of intellect. AI doesn't have intention. It doesn't have emotion, motivation, morality, judgment, all of those things that make us human. But, and this is sort of the catch and the thing we all have to attend to, AI can simulate those things in ways that can be misleading. And I'm sure many of you saw, because a number of reporters, when ChatGPT first came out, one of them got ChatGPT to tell him to divorce his spouse and other things like that, right? These things can simulate emotion and other things, but they don't have it. And, to me at least, simulated morality is not morality. And I hope it's not to most of you. But it's very hard not to be misled. We've had millennia of stories, starting with Talos, if not before, of envisioning man-made human-like beings. And one of the things that you hear about out there is alignment of AI with human values. How do we get AI to reflect human values more, like our morality or our judgment? This is good, but it's a stopgap. It's not going to solve the problem that AI is really just a form of intellect. So one of the things we really need to tease apart is, because AI is so different, it's affecting the very ways that we identify ourselves, what makes humans different from other beings in the world. And this is a major focus of the book that I wrote with the late Henry Kissinger and with Eric Schmidt a few years ago, which is AI is a new kind of intellect. So not only does it not have these other human attributes, even its intellect is different. It's not human reason, and it's not faith in the divine. It's a third way of understanding the world. So this raises fundamental questions about what it means to be us. And it's therefore going to make us uneasy, even if it's doing something good. So how do we distinguish this uneasiness from things that really cause risks that need to be addressed? And those are the kinds of questions that you all need to be thinking about. Am I just kind of feeling uneasy here, or is this thing really being used for something that I should be scared of? So one place that I think is very important, and we should sort of be scared in some sense, but that scared doesn't mean, I just should say this repeatedly because I ask these questions and then people think I'm very pro the use of AI. I think that it's going to solve all kinds of things that we cannot solve alone as humans, and things that matter to all of us, like human health. And so it's important, but it's also important to do this in ways that preserve things like human agency, that preserve things like human dignity and human responsibility. So AI can do either. It can enfranchise or disenfranchise. It can inform or misinform. These things have been true for mechanization for many years. Like if we go back to the mechanization of the industrial age, we have the same issues. But AI is not about physical world. It's about the mental world. It's more confusing. It's more different. But it's very important to think about these analogies. Like assembly line work is pretty disenfranchising. You're there, you're a cog in a big system. But power tools, come on, at least ask the men in the room, right? I mean, you know, that's very enfranchising. You can go and do a lot of stuff, a lot of agency. So when we think about driver navigation, as I mentioned, that's AI telling you where to go next, how to avoid traffic, et cetera. It can be really empowering or really disempowering. It can be empowering for the individual. It's sort of like a power tool. But for the ride-sharing driver, they're supposed to follow the route on the map. They are a cog in a much bigger system. And that reduces their agency and their individual choice. So this brings us to, I think, one of the most important things when we think about AI, which is that a lot of AI right now is focused on substitution, substituting AI for humans. And we saw this in some of the earlier presentations today, ways AI could be used to replace humans in various contexts. But if we go all the way back really to the same era as Alan Turing, as is pointed out earlier this morning, who's responsible for a lot of the ways that we think about machine intelligence, J.C.R. Licklider had a paper. The title is not like a real, sort of title. It's not a grabbing title for a non-technical person, and it's certainly dated to the 60s, Man-Computer Symbiosis. But his thesis is very powerful. It's humans and intelligent machines together, better than either one alone. So it's not about AI that replicates human behavior and therefore can be used to replace humans. It's about places where humans alone can be augmented by AI and AI alone can be augmented by humans. And this is a different view that's very important. As we've had more and more focus on issues of AI safety, which many people are rightly concerned about and asking questions about, this question of alignment that I mentioned before, it really underscores the importance that standalone AI is often not the answer. It's not saying that sometimes standalone AI isn't good, but many times when you want human judgment, when you want human intuition, when you want human morality and values, you really want to look for ways to combine AI and humans. So that naturally raises questions of governance. Should we be trying to nudge this in some way through governance, regulations, the approach to governance that comes to mind most immediately? And here we've had a group of faculty at MIT looking at these kinds of questions and trying to advise people in the government. And I think one of our biggest conclusions is that there should not be separate policies for AI, at least at this point in time. Rather, if human activity without AI is being regulated, then the use of AI should similarly be. Using AI should not be some excuse, for example, to be able to give lousy medical advice. We regulate who can give medical advice. We shouldn't allow AI to give medical advice unless it's similarly being regulated in some sense. And maybe that will mean that it's collaborative AI. So that's sort of the point there. Separate policies can create inconsistencies. It also helps us pursue policy approaches that encourage deployment of human AI collaboration rather than standalone AI. If we're going to regulate AI, we think about doing it in the same sort of ways that we regulate humans in terms of the behavior and the outcomes. So I'm not a huge fan of regulation. I think regulation is a necessary evil. I think the completely open capitalist system can sometimes go off the rails. So in particular, I think when we think at all about regulation as a form of governance, we really have to think about norms and responsibility, and then the laws, the regulations have to be consistent with that. If you think back to the Prohibition in the United States, that was laws completely inconsistent with societal norms. That did not go really well, except if you were a criminal producing and smuggling bootleg alcohol. So I think it's very important to develop these, and I want to offer you one that we clearly don't have right now. What's the fork in a toaster for AI? What is clear misuse so that it's your responsibility in doing it? This picture here is actually an image of a very early toaster, about the early 1900s. And you can see that it would be pretty easy to electrocute yourself with this toaster. We've developed norms, but we've also developed best practice guardrails against the uses that we want to become the norms. So they're enclosed, jamming the fork in. It's pretty clear mechanically you're doing something wrong there. So these are the kinds of things we need to develop with AI. Guardrails against other uses, well understood legal responsibilities, and norms that we can all understand. Now in a specialized area, I'm at least cautiously optimistic right now. Recently, the big AI providers have offered copyright infringement indemnity to their commercial users of their generative AI. So a company uses Microsoft's generative AI to produce some text and then distributes it and then gets sued for copyright infringement. Since nobody at the company wrote that text, Microsoft is actually willing to take responsibility for that. So some of these things are starting to happen on their own without new regulation. Doesn't mean regulation won't be needed, but things are going in a reasonable direction. So coming to the sort of last part of this, I want to talk a little bit about people learning from AI. So we talked a little bit, education came up in some of the earlier sessions. So AlphaZero is a program that learned how to play chess, but not from prior human experience. And this is one of the really interesting things about AI. It doesn't have to learn from humans. Right now, most AI does, but it doesn't have to. And when it doesn't, it can really change the world. Now, chess, you might argue, is not the world broadly, but in the world of chess, it's completely changed how chess players play at the grandmaster level because it discovered new tactics and new strategies. In 2021, Science Magazine listed as a breakthrough of the year the ability to predict the 3D structure of proteins from what we can actually measure, which is the amino acid sequences. And this is, at 2021, they thought it was a big deal. I can tell you, in 2024, it's transformed the life sciences in ways that even in 2021, nobody would have predicted, including Science Magazine. But now, generative AI, the techniques that drive these large language models like ChatGPT are going to further revolutionize our understanding of proteins, helping drive the development of a new area called metagenomics. So I want to come to one scary topic, and certainly one that Henry Kissinger, my co-author on the book, this talk draws from the book in many other places, but on the book knew much more about than just about anybody in the world. So there are real cautionary parallels to the pre-World War I period. That was mass industrialization, and the advances there led to big changes in military capacity and speed. In fact, this photo is a photo of a train track that was literally put in place in a matter of weeks to transport troops to the front lines. Something that was impossible, and so literally a decade before. But the diplomacy and the doctrines all assumed it was really hard to get materiel to the front lines. And that made the front lines a flashpoint in a way that was not true before. And AI certainly is changing the capacity for military engagement and interaction. It's this different form of intelligence, as I hope I convinced you before. And our current strategies, both military and our diplomatic doctrines, don't take that into account. It's all about human experience and human interaction. So in closing, I really want to stress that building a better future using AI is up to everybody in this room, and I hope I've given you some framework, some tools for starting to think about and starting to be able to learn more on your own about how we can have machines become capable collaborators, partners, and teachers, how we can have AI augmentation, especially in these higher risk and higher reward settings, where a machine on its own probably is not something we want. We want other things other than some form of just raw intelligence. There are places, like medicine, we want an empathetic doctor, not just the super smartest one around. This is going to drive new insights, discoveries, and innovations that broadly improve people's lives, as long as we're attentive to both the positive and negative aspects at the same time. Thank you very much.